The two enemy MiG-29s appeared on radar at 0847 hours, streaking toward the Nevada test range at Mach 1.8. What happened next would shake the foundations of military aviation forever, because the pilot who intercepted them wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't even supposed to be flying. 20 minutes earlier, she had been covered in engine oil, her hands deep in the guts of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, while her male colleagues snickered about the grease monkey in a dress. But when those jets crossed into restricted airspace, everything changed. This is the story of Sarah Chun, the mechanic who proved that sometimes the best. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first drops of oil hit the concrete floor of Hangar 7 at exactly 0530 hours, marking the beginning of what would become the most extraordinary day in the history of Nellis Air Force Base. Sarah Chun had been awake since 0400, her calloused hands already wrapped around a torque wrench before most of her squadron mates had even opened their eyes. At 26, she possessed an intuitive understanding of aircraft mechanics that had taken her male counterparts years to develop, yet she remained perpetually relegated to the shadows of the flight line, the F-16C Fighting Falcon suspended. Above her represented more than just another maintenance job. Tail number 880537 had been giving the squadron fits for 3 weeks, experiencing intermittent engine flameouts that had grounded 2 of their most experienced pilots. The engine diagnostics showed nothing. Computer simulations revealed no anomalies. Every textbook protocol had been followed to the letter, yet the problem persisted like a ghost in the machine. Sarah had requested permission to tear down the entire propulsion system twice. Both times, Major Richard Hawkins, the squadron maintenance officer, had denied her request with barely concealed irritation. "Chun, you've been here 18 months. Let the senior mechanics handle the complex stuff. Stick to routine inspections and parts replacement." His dismissive tone carried the weight of institutional bias that Sarah had learned to navigate with careful precision. But at 0530 on this particular Tuesday morning, Sarah Chun had decided that institutional protocol could wait. She had spent her off-duty hours poring over technical manuals, correlating maintenance logs with weather data, pilot reports with fuel consumption records. A pattern had emerged that everyone else had missed: a subtle relationship between humidity levels, engine temperature, and the specific throttle positions that preceded each flameout. The hangar buzzed with the familiar symphony of military aviation maintenance. Pneumatic tools hissed and whined, metal clanged against concrete, and the persistent hum of diagnostic equipment created a mechanical lullaby that Sarah found more comforting than any music. She had grown up in this environment, the daughter of a Navy machinist who had taught her that every bolt, every wire, every component had a story to tell if you knew how to listen. Technical Sergeant Marcus Webb appeared at her workstation carrying a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the expression of a man who had seen too many supposedly simple repairs turn into week-long nightmares. "Chun, please tell me you're not about to do something that's going to get us both written up." Webb had been Sarah's unofficial mentor since her arrival at Nellis, one of the few senior enlisted personnel who judged her work by its results rather than her gender. "Marcus, look at this." Sarah spread a series of printouts across her workbench, each page covered with handwritten notes and highlighted sections. Every flameout occurred when ambient humidity exceeded 68%, engine oil temperature hit exactly 347 degrees Fahrenheit, and the pilot advanced the throttle from military power to afterburner within a specific 2-second window. Webb studied the data with the methodical attention that had made him one of the most respected mechanics on the base. After several minutes, he looked up with surprise flickering across his weathered features. "These correlations. How did you isolate these variables?" I cross-referenced 17 different data streams over the past 6 months. The pattern only emerges when you factor in the specific atmospheric conditions during each incident. Sarah's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had done her homework thoroughly. I think there's a microscopic crack in the fuel nozzle assembly that only opens under very specific thermal expansion conditions. The fuel nozzle assembly was buried deep within the F100 engine, requiring nearly 8 hours of disassembly to access. It was the kind of speculative repair that could result in disciplinary action if Sarah was wrong, and career advancement if she was right. Webb understood the stakes as clearly as she did. You realize Hawkins will have your head if you tear into that engine without authorization? Webb's concern was genuine, born from years of watching talented mechanics get crushed by military bureaucracy. Sarah was already reaching for her socket set. Marcus, this aircraft has been grounded for 3 weeks. We've tried everything else. Either I'm right and we solve the problem, or I'm wrong and we're exactly where we started, minus one fuel nozzle assembly. What followed was 6 hours of meticulous disassembly that demonstrated why Sarah Chun had graduated at the top of her technical school class. Her hands moved with surgical precision, each component carefully cataloged and positioned for reassembly. She worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon, occasionally pausing to make notes or consult technical diagrams. The other mechanics gradually gathered around her workstation, drawn by curiosity and the rare spectacle of someone attempting such an ambitious diagnostic procedure. Staff Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez, who had initially been skeptical of having a female mechanic in the squadron, found himself genuinely impressed by Sarah's methodical approach. "Damn, Chun, you work like you've been doing this for 20 years. By 11:30 hours, Sarah had reached the fuel nozzle assembly. The component appeared pristine under visual inspection, its titanium surface unmarked and properly torqued. But when she placed it under the high-powered magnification microscope, a hairline crack became visible along one of the fuel injection ports, exactly where her calculations had predicted. The crack was less than 2 millimeters long and invisible to the naked eye, but it created a perfect storm of mechanical failure. Under the precise conditions Sarah had identified, when humidity, temperature, and throttle position aligned perfectly, thermal expansion would open the crack just enough to disrupt fuel flow for a fraction of a second, long enough to cause an engine flameout, brief enough to close again before diagnostic equipment could detect the anomaly. Word of Sarah's discovery spread through the squadron like wildfire. By the time Major Hawkins arrived at Hangar 7, a small crowd had assembled around the microscope, each person taking their turn to peer at the microscopic flaw that had stumped the entire maintenance team for weeks. Hawkins examined the evidence with the grudging respect of an officer who understood that being wrong about subordinates was far more dangerous than being right about regulations. "Outstanding work, Chun. How long for the repair?" 4 hours for parts replacement and reassembly, sir. We'll have her ready for flight testing by 1600 hours. Sarah's response was crisp and professional, betraying none of the satisfaction she felt at finally being vindicated. But vindication came with its own complications. As word of Sarah's diagnostic breakthrough spread beyond the maintenance squadron, it attracted the attention of people who viewed her success through different lenses. Some saw it as proof that talent could emerge from unexpected places. Others saw it as a threat to established hierarchies. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Morrison, the squadron commander, arrived at the hangar during the final stages of reassembly. Morrison was a veteran F-16 pilot with over 3,000 flight hours and a reputation for running one of the most effective fighter squadrons in the Air Force. She also happened to be one of only 12 female fighter pilots in her entire career field. "Chun, walk me through what you found." Morrison's request was delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of a commander who understood that exceptional performance deserved recognition regardless of its source. Sarah explained her methodology with The same precision she had applied to the repair itself, outlining how she had isolated the relevant variables and predicted the location of the mechanical failure. Morrison listened with the focused attention of someone who understood both the technical complexity of the discovery and its broader implications. "Have you considered flight training, Chun?" The question caught Sarah completely off guard. "Your understanding of aircraft systems is impressive, but more importantly, you think like a pilot. You see relationships that others miss." The suggestion seemed almost absurd. Sarah was a mechanic, not a pilot. Her job was to fix aircraft, not fly them. The path from the maintenance hangar to the cockpit was virtually non-existent in the rigid hierarchy of military aviation. Officers flew. Enlisted personnel maintained. The boundaries were clearly defined and rarely crossed. But as Sarah stood in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the hangar doors, surrounded by the aircraft she had spent her career maintaining, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's words planted a seed that would grow into something neither of them could have predicted. The newly repaired F-16 was scheduled for a test flight the following morning, piloted by Captain Jake Sullivan, one of the squadron's most experienced aviators. Sullivan had been one of the pilots grounded by the mysterious engine failures, and he approached Sarah with genuine gratitude as she completed her final pre-flight inspection. "Chun, I owe you one. This bird has been driving us crazy for weeks." Sullivan's acknowledgement represented a shift in how the pilots viewed their maintenance personnel, or at least how they viewed Sarah. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, Sarah Chun packed up her tools with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The fuel nozzle assembly had been replaced, the engine had passed all diagnostic tests, and the aircraft was ready to return to flight status. By any measure, it had been a successful day, but success in the military often comes with unexpected consequences. Sarah's diagnostic breakthrough had impressed her superiors, but it had also attracted attention from sources she couldn't have anticipated. As she secured her toolbox and headed toward the base housing where she lived alone with her 2 cats, Sarah had no way of knowing that her name had already appeared in several official reports that would eventually reach the Pentagon. The next morning would bring the test flight that validated her repair. The following week would bring a commendation from the wing commander. But neither of those events would compare to what would happen exactly 17 days later, when 2 enemy aircraft would violate American airspace and Sarah Chun would find herself in a position that nobody, including herself, could have imagined. The mechanical skills that had made her the best troubleshooter in the squadron were about to be tested in ways that no technical manual had ever described. And the colleagues who had spent 18 months treating her as just another mechanic were about to discover that Sarah Chun possessed capabilities that extended far beyond her ability to repair aircraft. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The stage was set. The players were in position. And somewhere in the vast complexity of military bureaucracy, decisions were being made that would transform a grease-stained mechanic into something the Air Force had never seen before. The flight simulator at Nellis Air Force Base hummed to life at 0600 hours, 17 days after Sarah's diagnostic triumph. What should have been a routine morning became the catalyst for a chain of events that would redefine everything the military thought it knew about pilot selection. Sarah hadn't planned to be there. She had simply arrived early to inspect an F-16 scheduled for a training mission when she noticed the simulator bay's door standing open. Captain Diana Reeves emerged from the simulator pod, her flight suit damp with perspiration and her expression tight with frustration. The simulator had been programmed with an emergency scenario that had stumped 3 different pilots over the past week, a cascading systems failure that seemed impossible to overcome using standard procedures. 4th attempt, still can't crack it, Reeves muttered to herself, not noticing Sarah's presence in the doorway. The scenario involved simultaneous hydraulic failure, partial engine loss, and electrical system degradation while attempting a combat landing in adverse weather conditions. The computer program was designed to test pilot decision-making under extreme stress, pushing aviators to their absolute limits. Sarah studied the readouts displayed on the external monitors. The simulated aircraft parameters looked similar to a maintenance situation she had encountered months earlier on a different base. An F-16 had experienced nearly identical systems failures during a training exercise, and Sarah had spent hours analyzing the incident reports and technical data. "Captain Reeves?" Sarah's voice was tentative, aware that she was crossing invisible boundaries by even speaking up. "I've seen this failure pattern before, in the real world." Reeves turned, surprised to find the mechanic who had recently solved their fuel nozzle problem standing behind her. "Chun, right. The diagnostic wizard. What do you mean you've seen this before?" Sarah approached the simulator controls with the same careful precision she applied to aircraft maintenance. "Luke Air Force Base, about 8 months ago. Lieutenant Mitchell experienced this exact combination of failures during the red flag exercise. The key isn't trying to restore all systems. It's understanding which ones can be bypassed entirely." "What?" Followed was a 20-minute conversation that fundamentally altered both women's understanding of the relationship between mechanical knowledge and pilot skill. Sarah explained how certain electrical buses could be isolated to prevent cascading failures, how hydraulic backup systems could be manually activated through specific switch sequences, and how engine power could be managed to compensate for reduced control authority. "You want to try it?" Reeves asked, gesturing toward the simulator pod. The suggestion was simultaneously generous and completely unprecedented. Mechanics didn't fly simulators. The equipment was reserved for qualified pilots, and unauthorized use could result in serious disciplinary action. Sarah hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before climbing into the cockpit. The simulator controls felt foreign under her hands, but the system's displays were as familiar as her own reflection. She had spent thousands of hours studying these readouts, understanding their meanings, interpreting their warnings. The difference was that now she was inside the machine instead of underneath it. The emergency scenario began with the same cascading failures that had defeated 4 different pilots. But Sarah approached the problem like a mechanic rather than a pilot. Instead of trying to fly the aircraft in spite of its failures, she worked with the failures, using her understanding of how each system functioned to find creative solutions that the other pilots had missed. She isolated the damaged electrical bus within 30 seconds, preventing the cascade from spreading to critical navigation systems. She manually activated the backup hydraulic pump using a procedure that most pilots had forgotten existed. And when the simulated engine began losing power, she adjusted her approach profile to use gravity and momentum instead of thrust, treating the aircraft like a complex mechanical puzzle rather than a flying machine. The simulated F-16 touched down safely after a 15-minute flight that showcased problem-solving abilities no one had expected from someone who had never received formal pilot training. Sarah climbed out of the simulator pod to find Captain Reeves staring at the performance readouts with undisguised amazement. "Chun, that was extraordinary. Your system management was better than pilots with hundreds of flight hours." Reeves paused, clearly wrestling with the implications of what she had just witnessed. "Have you ever considered applying for pilot training?" The question echoed Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's inquiry from the previous week, but this time it carried more weight. Reeves wasn't just making polite conversation, she was recognizing genuine ability that transcended traditional career boundaries. "Ma'am, I'm enlisted. Mechanics don't become pilots." Sarah's response reflected the institutional reality that had shaped her entire career. The path from maintenance to pilot training was so rare that most service members never even considered it possible. "Actually, there are programs. They're competitive as hell, but they exist. Reeves pulled out her smartphone and began scrolling through Air Force regulations. The enlisted pilot training program accepts about 12 candidates per year from the entire Air Force. The selection process is brutal, but based on what I just saw, you might actually have a shot. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Major Carl Stevens, the squadron's assistant operations officer, who had been tracking down Captain Reeves for a briefing update. Stevens stopped short when he saw Sarah climbing out of the simulator pod, his expression shifting from confusion to irritation. "Reeves, what the hell is going on here? Why is a mechanic in our simulator?" Stevens' tone carried the sharp edge of an officer who believed that maintaining strict hierarchical boundaries was essential for military discipline. "Major, you need to see this." Reeves gestured toward the performance data still displayed on the monitoring equipment. "Chun just completed the emergency scenario that's been stumping our pilots all week, and she nailed it." Stevens examined the readouts with the skeptical attention of someone looking for evidence to support his preconceived notions. But the data was unambiguous. Sarah's performance metrics exceeded those of every pilot who had attempted the scenario, and her systems management demonstrated a level of technical understanding that impressed even experienced aviators. Interesting. But simulator performance doesn't translate to real flight experience. Stevens' dismissal was predictable, but it contained an undertone of uncertainty that suggested even he recognized the significance of what had just occurred. Captain Reeves wasn't willing to let the matter drop. "Sir, with respect, maybe we should consider that flight experience isn't the only relevant qualification for pilot training. Chun's mechanical background gives her insights that traditional pilot candidates don't possess." The debate that followed would continue in various forms over the next several days, spreading through the informal networks that connected different parts of the squadron. Some officers viewed Sarah's simulator performance as an interesting anomaly. Others saw it as evidence that the military's pilot selection process might be missing potential talent from non-traditional sources. But the conversation took on greater urgency when Colonel Elizabeth Hayes, the wing commander, received a briefing about Sarah's diagnostic breakthrough and her subsequent simulator performance. Hayes was a pragmatist who cared more about results than protocols, and she had spent her career advocating for policies that identified and developed talent wherever it emerged. Scheduled Chun for a comprehensive flight aptitude evaluation. Hayes directed her staff during the weekly command meeting. "If she's got the potential that people are claiming, I want to know about it." The flight aptitude evaluation was scheduled for the following Tuesday, conducted by Chief Master Sergeant Raymond Foster, a veteran flight instructor with over 20 years of experience evaluating pilot candidates. Foster had seen every type of aspiring aviator cocky hotshots who thought they knew everything, nervous perfectionists who second-guessed every decision, and natural talents who seemed born to fly. Sarah Chun didn't fit any of those categories. She approached the evaluation with the same methodical preparation that characterized her mechanical work. She spent the weekend studying flight manuals, reviewing aerodynamic principles, and practicing emergency procedures on a computer-based training system. Her approach was systematic and thorough, reflecting an understanding that success would require more than natural ability. The evaluation began with a written examination covering basic flight principles, aircraft systems, and emergency procedures. Sarah completed the test in 43 minutes, achieving a score that placed her in the top 5% of all candidates Foster had evaluated. Her answers demonstrated not just memorized knowledge, but genuine comprehension of the underlying principles that governed aircraft operation. The practical evaluation took place in a T-6 Texan II trainer aircraft, with Foster serving as the evaluating instructor. Sarah's first takeoff was cautious but smooth, her control inputs precise and well coordinated. She flew the aircraft like someone who understood exactly how each control surface affected the machine's behavior, making subtle adjustments that demonstrated an intuitive grasp of aerodynamic principles. "Chun, let's try some basic maneuvers," Foster commanded through the intercom. "Give me a standard rate turn to the left, followed by a climbing right turn to 3,000 feet. Sarah executed the maneuvers with the competence of someone who had been flying for months rather than minutes. Her altitude control was precise, her heading changes were smooth, and her power management showed an understanding of energy principles that usually took student pilots weeks to develop. Foster gradually increased the complexity of the requested maneuvers, testing Sarah's ability to handle multiple tasks simultaneously while maintaining aircraft control. She responded to each challenge with calm competence, never appearing flustered or overwhelmed by the increasing demands. "Emergency simulation," Foster announced. "You've just lost your primary electrical system. Show me your response." Sarah's reaction was immediate and correct. She reduced power, established a gliding descent, and began running through the emergency checklist with the same systematic approach she applied to aircraft maintenance. Her understanding of electrical systems allowed her to quickly identify which equipment would remain functional and which would be compromised by the failure. The evaluation concluded with a series of precision approaches and landings that showcased Sarah's ability to manage the complex relationship between airspeed, altitude, and aircraft configuration. Each landing was within acceptable parameters, with several exceeding the standards normally expected from experienced student pilots. Foster's evaluation report was unambiguous. Candidate Chun demonstrates exceptional flight aptitude with superior systems knowledge and outstanding situational awareness. Strongly recommend advancement to formal pilot training. The recommendation triggered a series of administrative processes that would normally take months to complete. But Colonel Hayes had been monitoring Sarah's progress closely, and she expedited the paperwork through channels that few people knew existed. Within 2 weeks, Sarah Chun had been accepted into the enlisted pilot training program, becoming one of only 12 candidates selected from thousands of applicants. The news spread through Nellis Air Force Base like wildfire, generating reactions that ranged from genuine celebration to barely concealed resentment. Sarah's fellow mechanics were largely supportive, proud that one of their own had achieved something so extraordinary. The pilots' reactions were more mixed, with some viewing her selection as validation of their belief that talent could emerge from unexpected places, while others worried about the precedent being set. Major Hawkins, who had initially dismissed Sarah's mechanical abilities, found himself in the awkward position of losing his best diagnostic technician to a program that he secretly believed she had no business joining. His farewell comments were polite but strained, reflecting his ongoing discomfort with developments that challenged his assumptions about military hierarchy. "Good luck, Chen. Hope you know what you're getting into." His words carried undertones that Sarah chose to ignore, focusing instead on the opportunity that lay ahead. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's response was far more positive. As one of the few female fighter pilots in the Air Force, she understood the challenges Sarah would face and the significance of her achievement. "Chun, you're about to discover that flying is the easy part. The real test will be proving that you belong there." Sarah's departure from Nellis was scheduled for the following month, when she would report to Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi for the beginning of formal pilot training. The weeks between her selection and departure were filled with preparatory activities, medical examinations, security clearance updates, and administrative processing that transformed her from an enlisted mechanic into an officer candidate. But those same weeks also brought her first real taste of the resistance she would face as someone who had violated traditional military boundaries. Anonymous complaints were filed questioning her qualifications. Informal conversations speculated about whether standards had been lowered to accommodate her selection. and subtle comments suggested that her success was more about politics than ability. Sarah responded to the criticism with the same quiet competence that had characterized her entire career. She continued performing her maintenance duties with meticulous attention to detail, completed her officer candidate preparation with typical thoroughness, and ignored the whispered conversations that followed her around the base. The final week before her departure brought an unexpected visitor to Hangar 7, Brigadier General Patricia Windsor, the commander of Air Education and Training Command, arrived for an unannounced inspection that focused specifically on Sarah's work and her preparation for pilot training. "Chun, I've been following your progress with great interest, General," Windsor said during their private conversation. "Your selection for pilot training represents something significant, not just for you personally, but for the Air Force as an institution. You're going to face challenges that have nothing to do with your ability to fly aircraft. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah's response reflected the confidence that had carried her from obscurity to opportunity. "Ma'am, I've spent my entire career proving that I could do jobs that people thought I couldn't handle. Flying aircraft won't be different. I'll succeed because I'm prepared to work harder than anyone else." General Windsor's smile suggested that she had expected exactly that answer. "Chun, I believe you will. And when you do, you're going to change how this institution thinks about where pilots come from." As Sarah Chun packed her belongings and prepared to leave Nellis Air Force Base, she carried with her the knowledge that she was embarking on more than just pilot training. She was challenging assumptions, breaking barriers, and opening doors that had been closed for generations. The grease-stained mechanic who had diagnosed an impossible engine problem was about to discover whether her skills could translate from the maintenance hangar to the cockpit of a fighter aircraft. The real test was just beginning. The humid Mississippi air hung thick over Columbus Air Force Base, and Sarah Chun stepped off the transport aircraft at 13:47 hours on a sweltering August afternoon. Pilot training would officially begin the following Monday, but the real education started the moment her boots touched the tarmac. The other officer candidates milling around the arrival area represented the Air Force's most carefully selected potential pilots, academy graduates with perfect records, ROTC distinguished graduates, and civilian college students who had scored in the top percentiles of every aptitude test the military could devise. Sarah was none of those things. Second Lieutenant Ashley Porter, a recent academy graduate with an aerospace engineering degree and a grandfather who had flown P-51 Mustangs in World War II, sized up the newcomers with the calculating assessment of someone accustomed to competition. Her gaze lingered on Sarah for several seconds, clearly noting the older woman's enlisted service ribbons and trying to categorize this anomaly in the otherwise predictable group of candidates. "You must be the mechanic everyone's been talking about," Porter said, her tone carefully neutral but carrying undertones that Sarah had learned to recognize. "I'm curious to see how maintenance experience translates to actual flying." The comment was delivered with the casual confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in military aviation, someone who had grown up expecting to wear pilot wings and command fighter aircraft. Sarah responded with a slight nod, understanding that her presence challenged assumptions that went far beyond military protocol. Lieutenant Colonel James Mackenzie, the squadron commander responsible for transforming these candidates into Air Force pilots, addressed the group with the no-nonsense authority of someone who had survived 22 years of military aviation. His weathered face and graying temples spoke of countless hours in fighter cockpits, and his reputation for demanding perfection had filtered down through multiple generations of student pilots. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are beginning the most challenging training program the Air Force offers. 50% of you will not graduate. The reasons for failure are numerous: academic deficiencies, flight performance issues, medical problems, or simple inability to handle the pressure. Your backgrounds don't matter here. Your previous achievements are irrelevant. You will be evaluated solely on your ability to meet the standards required of Air Force pilots. Mackenzie's eyes swept across the assembled candidates, pausing momentarily on Sarah before continuing. Some of you have been preparing for this moment your entire lives. Others have taken unconventional paths to get here. Success depends not on where you came from, but on your willingness to adapt, learn, and perform under pressure that you cannot imagine. The academic phase began immediately. Flight theory, aerodynamics, weather systems, navigation principles, aircraft systems, and emergency procedures filled 18-hour days that tested every candidate's ability to absorb and retain massive amounts of technical information. Sarah's mechanical background provided advantages in some areas she understood. Aircraft systems at a level that impressed even experienced instructors, but struggled with subjects like meteorology and navigation that had never been part of. Her maintenance training captain, Michael Torres, the academic instructor responsible for aircraft systems training, found himself consistently impressed by Sarah's grasp of complex mechanical relationships. During a lesson on hydraulic system failures, Sarah provided explanations that went beyond the standard curriculum, drawing on real-world maintenance experience that brought theoretical concepts to life. "Chun, your practical knowledge is exceptional," Torres commented after a particularly detailed discussion of backup system activation procedures. "Have you considered that your maintenance background might actually give you advantages that traditional candidates don't possess?" But Sarah's mechanical expertise couldn't compensate for gaps in other areas. Navigation principles that came naturally to candidates with private pilot licenses required hours of additional study. Weather theory that academy graduates had learned in their meteorology courses demanded intensive effort to master. Sarah found herself studying until well past midnight most evenings, working to close knowledge gaps that her unconventional background had created. The flight training phase introduced challenges that no amount of academic preparation could fully address. The T-6 Texan II trainer aircraft became both classroom and testing ground, revealing strengths and weaknesses that academic scorers couldn't predict. Sarah's initial flights demonstrated the same mechanical understanding that had impressed evaluators at Nellis, but also exposed areas where her lack of traditional flight experience created difficulties. Major Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's primary flight instructor, was a former F-16 pilot with over 2,000 combat hours, who had volunteered for training duty to share her experience with the next generation of aviators. Walsh had trained dozens of student pilots, and she approached Sarah's instruction with the same methodical professionalism. She applied to all her students high expectations balanced with patient guidance. "Chun, your systems knowledge is outstanding, but you're overthinking basic flight maneuvers," Walsh observed during their 5th training flight. "Flying isn't just about understanding how the aircraft works. It's about developing instinctive responses that don't require conscious thought. You need to trust the aircraft and trust yourself." The criticism was accurate and constructive, but it highlighted a fundamental challenge Sarah faced throughout the training program. Her analytical approach served her well in complex situations that required systematic problem solving, but sometimes hindered her development of the intuitive skills that distinguished good pilots from great ones. Competition within the training squadron was intense but generally collegial. Most candidates recognized that their success depended more on meeting program standards than on outperforming their classmates. But subtle tensions emerged around Sarah's presence, particularly as her unique background began generating attention from instructors and administrators. Second Lieutenant David Kim, a former enlisted air traffic controller who had earned his commission through officer candidate school, found himself in the unusual position of being Sarah's closest ally among the student pilots. Kim understood the challenges of transitioning from enlisted to officer ranks, and he recognized the additional pressures Sarah faced as someone who had violated even more traditional boundaries. "The academy graduates don't get it," Kim confided during one of their evening study sessions. They've never had to prove they belonged somewhere. They don't understand what it's like to have people questioning whether you deserve to be here. Sarah appreciated Kim's support, but she was determined to succeed based on her performance, rather than seeking sympathy for the obstacles she faced. Her response to criticism and skepticism was the same methodical competence that had characterized her entire career: work harder, prepare more thoroughly, and let results speak for themselves. The first major evaluation came during the 7th week of training, when each candidate was required to demonstrate solo flight proficiency in a comprehensive check ride that tested everything from basic aircraft handling to emergency procedures. Sarah's preparation was characteristically thorough, but she approached the evaluation with nervous energy that was unusual for someone normally so composed. Captain Rebecca Stone, the check pilot assigned to Sarah's evaluation, had a reputation for fairness combined with exacting standards. Stone's own path to military aviation had included obstacles related to her gender, and she understood the importance of ensuring that non-traditional candidates received objective evaluation rather than either favoritism or discrimination. Check ride began with a thorough oral examination covering aircraft systems, emergency procedures, and flight regulations. Sarah's answers demonstrated the comprehensive preparation that had become her trademark, but Stone noted tension in her voice that suggested performance anxiety beyond normal pre-flight nervousness. "Chun, relax. You know this material better than most instructors. Trust your preparation and fly the aircraft like you've been doing for the past 7 weeks." Stone's encouragement was genuine, reflecting her recognition that Sarah's knowledge and skills were solid despite her obvious nervousness. The flight portion of the evaluation showcased both Sarah's strengths and the areas where she continued to struggle. Her aircraft handling was precise and well coordinated, her systems management was exceptional, and her response to simulated emergencies demonstrated the analytical skills that had made her such an effective mechanic. But her performance lacked the smooth confidence that characterized natural pilots, and some of her maneuvers showed the careful deliberation of someone still thinking through each step. Stone's evaluation was thorough and honest. Satisfactory. Performance with areas for improvement. Candidate demonstrates excellent systems knowledge and sound decision-making, but needs to develop more intuitive flight skills. Recommend continued training with emphasis on building confidence and reducing over-analysis during basic maneuvers. The results placed Sarah in the middle of her training class, not the top performer, but well within acceptable standards for continuation in the program. More importantly, the evaluation validated her potential while identifying specific areas for improvement. Sarah responded to the feedback with typical determination, spending extra time in the simulator working on the smooth, instinctive responses that Stone had identified as necessary for advancement. Week 12 brought the transition to formation flying, a discipline that required precise aircraft control and split-second decision-making while maintaining exact positioning relative to other aircraft. Formation flying separated competent pilots from exceptional ones, and it represented the first step toward the advanced training that would eventually lead to fighter aircraft assignment. Sarah's first formation flight paired her with Lieutenant Porter, the Academy graduate who had made the comment about mechanics on their arrival day. Porter's flying was technically proficient, but overly aggressive, reflecting the confidence that had characterized her approach to every aspect of pilot training. The combination of Sarah's cautious precision and Porter's assertive style created tension that became apparent within minutes of takeoff. "Chun, you're lagging behind on position." "Changes," Porter's voice crackled through the radio during their second training mission. Formation flying requires immediate response to lead aircraft movements. You can't think through every adjustment. The criticism stung because it was partially accurate. Sarah's analytical nature, which had served her so well in maintenance and academics, sometimes slowed her response to the rapid changes required in formation flying. But Porter's tone carried condescension that went beyond constructive feedback, reflecting attitudes that Sarah had encountered throughout her unconventional career path. Major Walsh, monitoring the training flight from the ground, recognized the interpersonal dynamics that were affecting both pilots' performance. After landing, she addressed both students with the directness that had made her such an effective instructor. "Porter, your individual flying is excellent, but leadership and formation requires patience and clear communication. Criticism delivered with attitude doesn't improve performance, it undermines it. Chun, you have the skills necessary for formation flying, but you need to trust your instincts more and your analysis less. Formation flying is about feel as much as technique." The feedback prompted both pilots to examine their approaches and their attitudes. Porter began providing more constructive guidance, while Sarah worked to develop the instinctive responses that formation flying demanded. Over the following weeks, their partnership evolved from mutual tolerance to genuine respect. With each pilot learning from the other's strengths, the transformation became particularly evident during a complex four-ship formation exercise that required precise maneuvering through a series of tactical scenarios. Sarah's systems knowledge proved invaluable when one aircraft experienced a minor hydraulic problem, and her calm analysis helped the formation leader make appropriate adjustments without aborting the mission. Porter's aggressive flying skills complemented Sarah's methodical approach, creating a partnership that impressed their instructors and fellow students. Major Walsh's evaluation of their progress reflected the evolution both pilots had undergone. Excellent teamwork development. Chun has developed intuitive flight skills while maintaining her analytical strengths. Porter has learned to balance assertiveness with effective communication. Both candidates demonstrate the adaptability essential for advanced military aviation. The success in formation flying marked a turning point in Sarah's training experience. Her confidence grew as she proved capable of handling increasingly complex scenarios, and her fellow students began viewing her less as an anomaly and more as a capable pilot who had earned her place in the program. The mechanical expertise that had initially set her apart became an asset that enhanced rather than hindered her flying ability. But the real test of Sarah's development would come during the final phase of pilot training, when she would be evaluated for assignment to advanced fighter aircraft instruction. The competition for fighter training slots was intense, with only the top graduates receiving assignments to F-16, F-15, or F-22 programs. Sarah's unconventional background and middle-of-the-class performance made her selection uncertain, despite her steady improvement throughout the program. The selection process would evaluate not just flying ability, but leadership potential, technical knowledge, and the intangible qualities that distinguished fighter pilots from other military aviators. Sarah had proven she could fly aircraft competently and handle the academic requirements of pilot training. The question remaining was whether she possessed the exceptional qualities that would qualify her for the most demanding assignments in military aviation. As Sarah prepared for the final evaluations that would determine her future in the Air Force, she carried with her the knowledge that she had already achieved something extraordinary. The mechanic who had been dismissed by colleagues 18 months earlier had proven capable of mastering skills that defeated half of all candidates who attempted them. But the journey from maintenance hangar to fighter cockpit was far from complete, and the most challenging tests still lay ahead. The assignment board at Columbus Air Force Base displayed the future of 23 newly graduated pilots, their names listed beside aircraft types that would define the next decade of their careers. Transport pilots, tanker crews, bomber assignments, each representing honorable service paths that would take these officers to bases around the world. But only 6 names appeared beside the designation that every fighter pilot candidate secretly coveted: F-16 Fighter Training Unit, Luke Air Force Base, Arizona. Sarah Chun's name was the 4th on that exclusive list, The announcement came at 0800 hours on graduation day, delivered by Colonel Mackenzie with the same matter-of-fact tone he used for routine administrative announcements. But the implications of those assignments rippled through the assembled pilots like electricity, generating reactions that ranged from celebration to barely concealed disappointment. Lieutenant Porter, whose name appeared second on the fighter list, approached Sarah with genuine congratulations and something approaching amazement. "Chun, I honestly didn't think they'd give you a fighter slot. Not because you don't deserve it," she added quickly, "but because the Air Force isn't exactly known for taking chances on unconventional candidates." The selection had surprised even Sarah herself. Her training performance had been solid, but not exceptional, placing her consistently in the middle third of her class on most evaluations. But something in her combination of technical knowledge, problem-solving ability, and steady improvement had impressed the selection board enough to gamble on her potential rather than relying solely on demonstrated performance. Major Walsh's final evaluation had proved decisive. Lieutenant Chun represents an unusual combination of analytical capability and mechanical intuition that could prove valuable in fighter operations. While her flight performance metrics place her in the middle of the class ranking, her systems knowledge and emergency response capabilities are among the strongest I have observed in 15 years of instruction. Recommend assignment to fighter. Training with confidence in her ability to excel in that environment. The 3-month gap between pilot training graduation and the beginning of fighter training provided Sarah with her first opportunity to return home to San Francisco since beginning this journey. Her parents, both first-generation immigrants who had built successful careers through determination and hard work, struggled to comprehend their daughter's transformation from aircraft mechanic to fighter pilot candidate. "Sarah, we are proud of what you have accomplished," her father said during a quiet dinner at their favorite Chinatown restaurant. "But we also worry about the dangers of this path you have chosen. Flying fighter aircraft is very different from fixing them." The concern was understandable and shared by other family members who had followed Sarah's career with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. Her younger brother Michael, a software engineer at a tech startup, represented the more traditional path. Their parents had envisioned for both children stable, safe, and predictable. "Sarah's always been different," Michael told their extended family during a reunion gathering. "Even when we were kids, she took apart everything in the house to understand how it worked. Now she's taking apart her whole life to become something that maybe a dozen women in the entire military have ever done." The observation was more accurate than Michael realized. Female fighter pilots remained an extreme rarity in American military aviation, with fewer than 50 women qualified to fly combat aircraft across all service branches. Sarah's path from enlisted mechanic to fighter pilot candidate was so unusual that no clear precedent existed for the challenges she would face or the opportunity she might create. Luke Air Force Base in Arizona represented a dramatic change from the humid environment of Mississippi training. The desert landscape stretched endlessly toward distant mountains, broken only by the geometric patterns of military installations and the occasional contrails of aircraft practicing overhead. The F-16 fighter training unit occupied a sprawling complex of hangars, classrooms, and support facilities dedicated to transforming basic pilots into combat-ready fighter aviators. Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Martinez, the squadron commander responsible for F-16 training, had been monitoring Sarah's progress through official channels and informal networks that connected female military aviators across the service. Martinez understood both the significance of Sarah's assignment and the additional pressures she would face as one of only 2 women in her training class. "Chun, your reputation precedes you," Martinez said during their initial meeting. "Outstanding maintenance background, solid pilot training performance, and the distinction of being probably the only fighter pilot candidate who actually understands how these aircraft work at the component level. That knowledge will serve you well here, but don't let it become a crutch. Fighter pilots need to think tactically, not just mechanically. The F-16 Fighting Falcon represented a quantum leap in complexity from the T-6 trainer aircraft Sarah had mastered during pilot training. The multi-role fighter combined supersonic performance with sophisticated avionics, systems that required split-second decision-making while maneuvering in three-dimensional space at speeds approaching 1,200 miles per hour. The learning curve was steep for all students, but particularly challenging for pilots without extensive high-performance aircraft experience. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, Sarah's primary instructor pilot, had accumulated over 1,500 hours in F-16s. During deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, Rodriguez approached instruction with the intensity of someone who understood that training deficiencies could prove fatal in combat situations. But she also recognized the unique strengths that Sarah brought to fighter aviation. "Your systems knowledge is incredible," Rodriguez observed after Sarah's first aircraft familiarization flight. "Most students spend weeks learning to manage engine parameters, electrical systems, and hydraulic monitoring. You understand those systems better than pilots with years of experience. But we need to work on your situational awareness and threat prioritization. Fighter flying is about making complex decisions with incomplete information while someone is trying to kill you." The academic phase of fighter training introduced Sarah to disciplines that had never been part of her military experience. Air-to-air combat tactics, weapons systems employment, electronic warfare principles, and threat recognition required developing entirely new categories of knowledge that went far beyond aircraft maintenance or basic flight skills. The weapons systems instruction proved particularly challenging. Understanding how radar-guided missiles functioned was different from learning when and how to employ them against maneuvering targets. Sarah's analytical nature served her well in grasping the technical principles, but translating that knowledge into tactical decision-making required developing instincts that could only come through repetitive practice. Major Kevin Thompson, the weapons systems instructor, had initially been skeptical about Sarah's assignment to fighter training. His doubts weren't based on gender bias, but on concerns about whether someone with her unconventional background could develop the aggressive mindset that fighter operations required. Those concerns began evaporating during Sarah's third week of weapons training. Chun's approach to weapons employment is methodical and precise, Thompson noted in his evaluation. She thinks through engagement geometry and weapon selection with the systematic analysis of an engineer, but she's also developing the quick decision-making necessary for dynamic combat situations. Her mechanical background helps her understand why certain tactics work, which makes her more effective at applying them. The transition to actual flight training in the F-16 revealed both the advantages and limitations of Sarah's unique preparation. Her understanding of aircraft systems allowed her to manage complex emergencies with confidence that impressed experienced instructors. When a hydraulic system failure occurred during her 8th training flight, Sarah's response was so immediate and appropriate that Captain Rodriguez initially thought the emergency had been simulated for training purposes. "Chun, that was textbook emergency management," Rodriguez said after they landed safely. "Your systems knowledge combined with solid flight skills makes you one of the most competent students I've instructed. But you're still thinking too much." During basic maneuvering, fighter tactics require instinctive responses that don't allow time for analysis. The criticism was familiar and accurate. Sarah's analytical nature, which had served her so well in maintenance and academics, sometimes slowed her tactical responses during air-to-air maneuvering exercises. She understood the geometry of aerial combat intellectually, but translating that understanding into immediate action required developing muscle memory that could bypass conscious thought. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging Air-to-air exercise against an experienced aggressor pilot flying in wind-to-air. Exercise against an experienced aggressor pilot flying the F-5 Tiger II designed to simulate enemy aircraft characteristics. Sarah had struggled with similar exercises throughout training, allowing her analytical nature to delay critical maneuvering decisions while she processed tactical information. But this time something clicked. As the opposing aircraft maneuvered into an attacking position, Sarah responded with a defensive spiral that flowed naturally from her aircraft's energy state, rather than from conscious tactical analysis. The maneuver positioned her for a counterattack that resulted in a successful simulated missile engagement against an opponent who had defeated most other students. Outstanding flying, Chun, the aggressor pilot radioed after the exercise concluded. That defensive maneuvering showed real fighter pilot instincts. You're starting to think like your aircraft instead of thinking about your aircraft. Captain Rodriguez's debrief reinforced the significance of Sarah's performance breakthrough. You just demonstrated why the selection board chose you for fighter training. Your systems knowledge provides a foundation that most pilots take years to develop. And now you're building tactical instincts on top of that foundation. The combination could make you an exceptional fighter pilot. The praise was gratifying, but Sarah remained focused on the considerable challenges that lay ahead. Fighter training was only the beginning of a career path that would eventually lead to combat-ready status and operational assignments. Each phase would bring new tests of her ability to perform under pressure that extended far beyond anything she had experienced as a mechanic or student pilot. The final phase of F-16 training involved integration exercises that combined multiple elements: air-to-air combat, air-to-ground weapons delivery, electronic warfare, and mission planning into complex scenarios designed to simulate real combat operations. These exercises separated students who had mastered individual skills from those who could integrate multiple capabilities under the stress of simulated combat. Sarah's performance during integration training reflected the steady development that had characterized her entire aviation career. Her mission planning was thorough and realistic. Her weapons employment was precise and effective, and her air-to-air tactics showed the instinctive responses that had previously eluded her. More importantly, she demonstrated the ability to adapt to changing tactical situations without losing effectiveness. The final evaluation came during a large force exercise involving 12 aircraft in a complex air-to-air and air-to-ground scenario that tested every skill developed during 6 months of intensive training. Sarah's role as a wingman in a 4-ship formation required her to support the mission leader while maintaining situational awareness and contributing to overall mission effectiveness. The exercise began with a planned intercept of simulated enemy aircraft, followed by a transition to air-to-ground weapons delivery against heavily defended targets. Sarah's performance throughout the mission demonstrated competence across all required skill areas, but more importantly showed the judgment and adaptability that distinguished effective fighter pilots from technically proficient aviators. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez's final evaluation was unequivocal. Lieutenant Chun has successfully completed F-16 fighter training with performance that qualifies her for assignment to operational fighter squadrons. Her unique combination of technical knowledge and developed tactical skills represents a valuable addition to Air Force fighter capabilities. The graduation ceremony at Luke Air Force Base marked the culmination of a journey that had begun 18 months earlier in a maintenance hangar at Nellis. Sarah Chun, newly qualified F-16 pilot, stood among her classmates wearing the wings that represented membership in one of the military's most exclusive communities. But even as she celebrated this achievement, she understood that the real test of her capabilities lay ahead. Her assignment to the 388th Fighter Wing at Hill Air Force Base in Utah would place her in an operational squadron responsible for maintaining combat readiness and deploying worldwide in response to national security requirements. The transition from training environment to operational unit would bring new challenges that would test not just her flying ability, but her capacity to contribute effectively to missions that could have life or death consequences. As Sarah prepared to leave Luke Air Force Base for her operational assignment, she carried with her the confidence that came from proving herself capable of mastering one of the most demanding training programs in military aviation. The mechanic who had once been dismissed by colleagues had transformed herself into a combat-ready fighter pilot through determination, preparation, and the willingness to challenge assumptions about what was possible. But the journey was far from over. The skills she had developed and the reputation she had earned would soon be tested in ways that no training program could fully simulate. And the opportunity to prove that an unconventional path could lead to exceptional performance was approaching. Faster than anyone realized, Hill Air Force Base sprawled across the Utah landscape like a small city dedicated to the art of aerial warfare. The 388th Fighter Wing operated from this mountainous terrain with a mission that stretched from local training flights to global combat deployments. And Sarah Chun's arrival as the squadron's newest pilot coincided with preparations for their most ambitious exercise in years, a joint training operation that would test every aspect of their readiness for real-world contingencies. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes, commander of the 421st Fighter Squadron, had reviewed Sarah's training records with the careful attention he devoted to all new pilots joining his unit. Her unconventional background generated curiosity rather than concern. Hayes had learned through 20 years of military service that exceptional performance could emerge from unexpected sources, and Sarah's combination of technical knowledge and proven flight skills suggested potential that extended beyond standard pilot capabilities. "Chun, welcome to the Wild Boars," Hayes said during their initial meeting, referring to the squadron's mascot and call sign tradition. "Your training reports are impressive, but operational flying presents challenges that no training program can fully simulate. You'll be assigned to Captain Jackson's flight as his wingman, and your tactical call sign will be Wrench 1. Seemed appropriate given your background." The call sign assignment prompted mixed reactions from squadron members. Some viewed it as a respectful acknowledgement of Sarah's unique path to fighter aviation. Others saw it as a subtle reminder that she would always be defined by her maintenance background rather than her pilot qualifications. Sarah chose to interpret it as recognition of capabilities that extended beyond conventional pilot training, understanding that call signs often reflected both humor and respect in fighter pilot culture. Captain Derek Jackson, Sarah's flight lead, was a veteran F-16 pilot with over 800 combat hours accumulated during 3 deployments to the Middle East. Jackson approached the mentorship of new pilots with the intensity of someone who understood that tactical proficiency could mean the vital difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. His initial assessment of Sarah was based purely on her ability to contribute effectively to flight operations. "Wrench, your job as my wingman is straightforward: maintain formation, follow my lead, and keep me informed about threats I might miss," Jackson explained during their first mission briefing. "Your technical background might give you insights into aircraft performance that could prove valuable, but don't let that knowledge override tactical priorities. In combat, survival depends more on situational awareness than systems expertise." The squadron's operational tempo was significantly more intense than anything Sarah had experienced during training. Daily flying schedules included air-to-air combat training, close air support exercises, suppression of enemy air defenses missions, and complex multi-role scenarios that required rapid transitions between different tactical environments. Each mission demanded split-second decision-making while managing aircraft systems, monitoring threats, and coordinating with multiple other aircraft. Sarah's first month of operational flying revealed both the advantages and limitations of her unique preparation. Her systems management during complex missions was exceptional, allowing her to maintain aircraft performance while other pilots struggled with workload management. But her tactical development lagged behind pilots with similar flight hours, reflecting the time required to translate technical knowledge into operational effectiveness. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging close air support exercise at the Nevada Test and Training Range. Sarah's flight was tasked with providing air support to ground forces, engaged in a simulated battle against enemy positions defended by sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems. The scenario required precise weapons delivery while avoiding threats that could destroy aircraft venturing too close to defended areas. Captain Jackson's F-16 experienced a partial electrical failure just as they began their attack run, causing his targeting systems to malfunction at the critical moment when precision was essential for mission success. Standard procedures called for aborting the mission and returning to base, but the ground forces were depending on immediate air support to break enemy resistance. Wrench 1, lead's targeting system is down, Jackson radioed. Can you take the lead and complete the weapons delivery? Sarah's response demonstrated the confidence she had developed through months of operational flying. Lead, Wrench 1 has the lead. I have good targeting data and clear identification of friendly positions. Beginning attack run. What followed was a textbook demonstration of close air support that showcased Sarah's ability to integrate technical knowledge with tactical requirements. Her weapons delivery was precise enough to neutralize enemy positions while maintaining safe distances from friendly forces, and her systems management allowed her to complete multiple attack runs despite heavy simulated surface-to-air missile activity. The exercise controller's debrief highlighted Sarah's performance as exemplary. Wrench 1 demonstrated outstanding tactical flexibility and precise weapons employment under challenging conditions. Her ability to assume flight lead responsibilities and complete mission objectives, despite equipment failures, reflects the adaptability essential for combat operations. Captain Jackson's assessment was even more significant. Chun, that was outstanding flying. Your tactical decision-making has improved dramatically, and your technical knowledge allowed you to solve problems that would have forced other pilots to abort the mission. You're developing into the kind of pilot that squadron commanders want, leading complex operations. The praise reflected Sarah's evolution from a competent but cautious pilot into someone capable of taking initiative and leading others under pressure. Her confidence grew with each successful mission, and her reputation within the squadron shifted from curiosity about the former mechanic to respect for her developing capabilities as a fighter pilot. But operational flying also introduced Sarah to the broader political and strategic context that shaped military aviation. The 388th Fighter Wing was preparing for a major exercise called Red Flag, a massive training operation involving hundreds of aircraft from multiple nations designed to simulate large-scale combat operations. Red Flag represented the pinnacle of realistic combat training, and squadron assignments to the exercise were highly competitive. Major General Patricia Williams, the wing commander, had been monitoring Sarah's development through official reports and informal feedback from squadron leadership. Williams understood the significance of having successfully integrated an enlisted-to-pilot candidate into operational fighter aviation, and she recognized the broader implications for military personnel policies. Chun's success challenges traditional assumptions about pilot selection and training, Williams noted during a staff meeting. Her technical background provides capabilities that complement conventional pilot training, and her operational performance suggests that we might be missing similar talent in other unconventional candidates. The observation would prove prescient in ways that nobody could have anticipated. As Sarah continued developing her operational skills, events were unfolding in distant parts of the world that would soon test her abilities under circumstances that no training exercise could simulate. Intelligence reports filtered through classified channels indicated increasing activity by hostile air forces in regions where American interests were at stake. Foreign military aviation capabilities were expanding rapidly, with potential adversaries acquiring sophisticated aircraft and weapon systems that pose new challenges to American air superiority. The strategic balance that had favored American forces for decades was shifting in ways that demanded adaptive responses from military aviation units. 388th Fighter Wing received orders to participate in a classified test program designed to evaluate new tactical procedures against simulated advanced threats. The program, designated Guardian Shield, would involve carefully controlled scenarios using actual foreign manufactured aircraft operated by American test pilots to provide the most realistic possible training experience. Sarah's assignment to Guardian Shield reflected both her technical qualifications and her demonstrated tactical competence. The program required pilots who could adapt quickly to unfamiliar threats while maintaining precise control over classified testing procedures. Her background in aircraft systems combined with her operational experience made her an ideal candidate for the demanding requirements. Colonel Hayes briefed the selected pilots on Guardian Shield with the seriousness that classified programs demanded. This exercise will test our tactical procedures against aircraft and weapon systems that represent our most capable potential adversaries. The scenarios are designed to push you beyond your comfort zones and identify weaknesses in our current tactics. Your performance will directly influence how we prepare for future conflicts. The briefing included detailed technical information about the threat aircraft that would be used in the exercise, modified versions of foreign fighters that had been acquired through various intelligence channels and extensively tested to understand their capabilities and limitations. The aircraft represented technology that American forces might face in future conflicts, and the testing was designed to develop countermeasures before such encounters occurred in combat. Sarah's reaction to the threat briefing reflected the analytical nature that had characterized her entire career. While other pilots focused on tactical considerations, she found herself studying the technical specifications and performance characteristics with the detailed attention of someone who understood how aircraft capabilities translated into operational advantages. The threat aircraft have impressive performance specifications, Sarah noted during the pilot briefing, but their avionics integration appears less sophisticated than our systems. That might create opportunities for exploitation if we can force engagements that emphasize avionics capabilities over raw performance. Her observation impressed the briefing officers and demonstrated the value of having pilots who understood both tactical and technical aspects of aerial combat. Sarah's mechanical background allowed her to identify potential vulnerabilities that pilots with conventional training might overlook, providing insights that could prove crucial during actual encounters. The Guardian Shield exercise was scheduled to begin the following week at a classified location in the Nevada desert. Sarah would be flying her regular F-16 against unknown pilots, operating foreign aircraft under realistic combat conditions. The scenarios would test every skill she had developed since leaving the maintenance hangar, and the results would influence American tactical doctrine for years to come. But as Sarah prepared for what she expected to be an intensive but routine training exercise, she had no way of knowing that Guardian Shield would become something far more significant than anyone had planned. The classified test program was about to intersect with real-world events in ways that would transform a training exercise into the most important test of her career. The foreign aircraft that she would face during Guardian Shield were not just sophisticated replicas operated by American test pilots. Some of them were flown by actual foreign pilots who had been operating under cover of the training exercise for purposes that extended far beyond American tactical development, and the scenarios that had been designed to test American capabilities were about to become genuine combat situations with stakes that no training program could simulate. Sarah Chun The former mechanic who had transformed herself into a fighter pilot through determination and skill was about to face the ultimate test of everything she had learned. The technical knowledge that had started her journey, the flight skills she had developed through intensive training, and the tactical competence she had gained through operational experience would all be tested in a confrontation that would determine not just her own survival, but the success of a critical national security operation. The stage was set for the encounter that would define her career and prove that sometimes the most unlikely candidates become the most effective warriors. The grease-stained hands that had once diagnosed impossible mechanical problems were about to guide an F-16 Fighting Falcon through aerial combat that would test the limits of both machine and pilot. And when the test came, Sarah Chun would discover that all the skepticism, all the barriers, and all the challenges she had overcome had prepared her for this moment in ways that no conventional training could have achieved. The pre-dawn silence at the classified Nevada facility was shattered by the scream of turbine engines as Sarah Chun ran through her final pre-flight checks. Guardian Shield Day 3 had arrived with crystal clear skies and light winds, perfect conditions for what intelligence officers assured her would be the most realistic air-to-air training she had ever experienced. The briefing had been unusually detailed, emphasizing that today's opposition would employ authentic foreign tactics with unprecedented realism. Sarah's F-16, tail number 910342, carried a full load of training missiles and enough fuel for 2 hours of intensive maneuvering. Her call sign, Wrench 1, felt particularly appropriate this morning as she applied the systematic approach that had served her throughout her unconventional journey from maintenance hangar to fighter cockpit. At 0837 hours, she lifted off from the desert runway and turned toward the designated exercise area, unaware that 2 actual MiG-29 Fulcrums had penetrated American airspace 12 minutes earlier. The aircraft, flown by experienced foreign pilots, had used carefully planned routes to avoid detection while approaching the same Nevada test range where Sarah was conducting what she believed to be a routine training mission. The first indication that something was wrong came at 0847 hours, when Sarah's radar detected 2 fast-moving contacts approaching from the northeast at high altitude. The aircraft signatures didn't match any American fighters, and their aggressive approach profile violated every safety protocol established for training exercises. Range control, Wrench 1 has 2 unknown contacts bearing 045 Angels. 28, hot, Sarah transmitted, using the standard terminology for potentially hostile aircraft. The response from range control carried an urgency that immediately elevated Sarah's alert level. Wrench 1, those contacts are not part of today's exercise. Authenticate your position and prepare for an immediate vector to intercept. Sarah's training took over as she processed the implications of range control's transmission. Unknown aircraft in restricted American airspace represented a genuine threat that required immediate response. Her F-16 was the only American fighter in position to intercept before the intruders could reach sensitive installations or escape back across international boundaries. Range control, Wrench 1 authenticating position. Request weapons authorization for live intercept. The words felt surreal as Sarah transmitted them, transforming a routine training flight into her first real combat mission. Wrench 1, you are cleared to engage hostile aircraft. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Good hunting. The 2 MiG-29s had descended to 18,000 feet and were accelerating toward a heading that would take them directly over classified facilities. Sarah's intercept course required a climbing turn that would position her between the intruders and their apparent objective, but it also meant engaging 2 experienced pilots in aircraft specifically designed for air-to-air combat. Sarah's analytical nature, which had sometimes hindered her during training exercises, now became her greatest asset. As she closed the distance to the enemy aircraft, She mentally cataloged everything she knew about MiG-29 capabilities and limitations. The aircraft were faster than her F-16 in a straight line, but less maneuverable at high angles of attack. Their pilots were skilled, but they were operating in unfamiliar airspace against an opponent who understood both the tactical environment and the technical capabilities of all aircraft involved. The engagement began at 15 miles when both MiG-29s turned towards Sarah's F-16, clearly aware that they had been intercepted. Sarah's radar warning receiver came alive with threat indications as the enemy aircraft activated their targeting systems, but her first shot came from beyond their effective engagement range. Fox 3, Sarah called as she launched an AIM-12 OM-ROM missile at the lead MiG. The advanced radar-guided missile streaked away from her aircraft, tracking toward the enemy fighter with lethal precision. The MiG pilot's response demonstrated the training and experience that made him a formidable opponent. He executed a series of defensive maneuvers designed to break the missile's radar lock while simultaneously positioning his aircraft for a counterattack. But Sarah had anticipated this response, positioning herself to exploit the predictable defensive maneuvering. Her second missile launch came as the lead MiG completed his defensive turn, catching the aircraft in a vulnerable position with limited maneuvering options. The AIM-120 detonated within lethal range, sending the first enemy fighter spinning toward the desert floor in a cloud of smoke and debris. Splash 1, Sarah transmitted, using the standard terminology for a successful air-to-air kill. But her celebration was brief. The second MiG-29 was already maneuvering for an attack position that would test every skill she had developed since leaving the maintenance hangar. The surviving enemy pilot was clearly the more experienced of the two, and he used his aircraft's superior straight line performance to extend away from Sarah's F-16 before turning back for a head-on attack. The geometry of the engagement forced both pilots to make split-second decisions about weapons employment while closing at a combined speed exceeding 1,200 miles per hour. Sarah's mechanical understanding of aircraft systems became crucial as she pushed her F-16 to its performance limits. She understood exactly how much stress the airframe could handle, how the engine would respond to maximum afterburner settings, and how the flight control system would behave during extreme maneuvering. This knowledge allowed her to extract every ounce of performance from her aircraft while maintaining precise control. The head-on pass occurred at a range of less than 2 miles, with both aircraft launching missiles simultaneously. Sarah's AIM-9 Sidewinder tracked toward the MiG's hot exhaust signature, while an enemy missile streaked toward her own aircraft. The next few seconds would determine whether her technical knowledge and tactical training were sufficient to survive against an experienced adversary. Sarah's defensive maneuvering combined everything she had learned about fighter tactics with her intuitive understanding of aircraft performance. She rolled inverted and pulled maximum G-forces while dispensing chaff and flares, designed to confuse the incoming missile's guidance system. The enemy missile passed within 50 feet of her aircraft before losing track and detonating harmlessly behind her. Her own missile found its mark with devastating effect. The AIM-9 Sidewinder impacted the MiG-29's left engine, causing catastrophic damage that sent the enemy fighter into an uncontrolled spin. Sarah watched through her canopy as the pilot ejected safely, his parachute deploying as his aircraft crashed into the desert below. Splash 2, Sarah transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Range control, both hostile aircraft are down. Wrench 1 is Winchester and returning to base. The flight back to base provided time for Sarah to process what had just occurred. The former mechanic who had been dismissed by colleagues less than 2 years earlier had just successfully engaged and defeated 2 enemy aircraft in her first real combat mission. The technical knowledge that had started her journey, combined with the flight skills and tactical training she had developed, had proven decisive in the most challenging test any pilot could face. The debriefing that followed confirmed that Sarah's intercept had prevented a significant intelligence breach. The enemy aircraft had been attempting to photograph classified installations and collect electronic intelligence about American radar systems. Her quick response and effective engagement had protected national security assets while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded all expectations. Colonel Hayes's evaluation was unequivocal. Lieutenant Chun's performance represents the finest example of fighter pilot skill and judgment I have witnessed in 20 years of military aviation. Her technical knowledge, tactical competence, and performance under pressure reflect the highest standards of Air Force fighter operations. But perhaps the most significant recognition came from Major General Williams, who had been monitoring the engagement from the command center. "Chun, your success validates everything we believe about identifying and developing talent from non-traditional sources. You've proven that exceptional performance can emerge from the most unlikely places when combined with determination and proper training." The story of Sarah Chun's transformation from dismissed mechanic to combat-proven fighter pilot spread through military aviation circles with remarkable speed. Her success challenged fundamental assumptions about pilot selection and training, while demonstrating that technical knowledge and analytical thinking could complement traditional flight skills in powerful ways. The colleagues who had once snickered about the grease monkey in a dress now spoke of her with genuine respect and admiration. Her path from maintenance hangar to fighter cockpit had proven that barriers existed to be broken, that unconventional backgrounds could produce exceptional capabilities, and that sometimes the best pilot in the room was the one nobody expected. Sarah Chun had achieved something that went beyond personal success. She had opened a door that had been closed for generations, proving that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. The hands that had once been dismissed as suitable only for turning wrenches had guided a fighter aircraft through aerial combat that would be studied and remembered for decades to come. And when future generations of military aviators faced their own challenges and skeptics, they would remember the mechanic who became a pilot, the woman who outflew enemy jets, and the proof that extraordinary achievements await those brave enough to challenge what others believe is possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.